welcome to part 1 of my Mega Steelix making of video. I designed this cosplay based off the armor designs from the Monster Hunter games, along with my favorite Pokemon, Steelix. I came up with the design for this armor back in 2019, but I couldn't start working on it until early 2020. As you can see from my original sketch, I love the idea of the oversized pauldrons and the large pronounced chest. And this was a design that I really wanted to bring over into the final design of the cosplay. And even though I said that this cosplay is heavily inspired by Monster Hunter, it's also heavily inspired by World of Warcraft armored silhouettes and a lot of Zack Fisher's artwork. I also really wanted to add a midriff into this cosplay's design for the mobility and also just the overall aesthetic of the armor. This was my first project of this scale and complexity. I've worked with LEDs before, and I've worked with foam before to make armor, but nothing of this scale. So I've taken my 10 years of cosplay experience and thrown it into this one project, and I only gave myself about 2 months to finish it. Like I said, this is part 1 of my making of video, so if you wouldn't mind subscribing, hitting that bell icon so you'll be notified when I upload the next part. And with that being said, let's just jump right into the video. Alright, so I started this cosplay with the centerpiece of the build, which is the chest. I didn't get a lot of footage of me building this, unfortunately, so here are a few clips of what it looked like during the process. The inspiration for the chest is basically the lower jaw of Steelix, with the teeth surrounding the neckline and the 2 huge blades that stick out of the lower jaw. I also incorporated the back of the chest piece. Even though you wouldn't see it as much, I did give it some detail based off of some of the 3D models of Steelix. I tried making the chest piece out of as little pieces as possible, so when finishing it, I wouldn't have to fill as many seams or sand a whole lot. Here I'm applying contact cement to a foam bevel, so I can add that to the bottom of the chest piece to give it a nice sharp bordering edge. This detail wasn't in my original concept art, but adding these foam bevels and changing up the design a little bit really helped bring this cosplay together. You will continue to see throughout this video that I do change the design a little bit off of my concept art, because translating from 2D to 3D doesn't always work, and once I'm actually working on the foam, I realize what needs to be changed. Here I'm working on the teeth to go around the neckline of the chest plate. I'm taking these little triangles that I cut out and I am beveling down the edges and sanding down the center of them so they have a nice crease in the center. And then I'm adding contact cement to put them into shape, and I'm going to be heat forming them. I carve down the edges and give it a nice pass with my Dremel to make the seams pretty much disappear. I replicate the teeth about 4 more times, and then I attach them to the chest plate with contact cement. After I put all the teeth down, I'm cutting a small rectangular piece of foam to add between the back two teeth to make a back collar. And then I sand all the edges down clean so it looks like the back collar is one continuous piece. Here I am making the blade things that go on the front of Steelix's jaw. I made these out of just triangle pieces of foam that I layered some foam on top of to make it a solid three-dimensional shape. And then I'm gluing them to a thinner piece of foam on the very back so I can wrap it around the front of the chest piece. I made two of these in the exact same way, and I'm just attaching them to the lower chest piece with contact cement. Here I'm inserting little triangle pieces in between each of the larger triangles to make that little recessed area that you see in the artwork for Steelix. I'm adding contact cement around the front of the chest piece where the seam should be to add a triangular foam bevel to give the chest piece a very sharp edge. And that is the finished build for the chest piece. There's still a lot of work to do on it, but this is what it looks like when it was all done. I start the Pauldrons by patterning out and cutting out a few foam pieces that will make up the base for the Pauldron. These pieces get heat formed, beveled on the edges, and then glued with contact cement to make a nice rounded shape. When gluing things with contact cement together, it's good to start from one corner or one edge and working your way up. Like I said, this white piece is serving as the base for the Pauldron. So right now I'm cutting out black pieces of EVA foam in a higher density so I can make the outer shell of the Pauldron. This process of eyeballing and cutting out certain angular pieces is repeated for half of the pauldron shape. I'm trying to make all these pieces I'm adding super angular and have their own flat plane on them to mimic the cut stone slash steel look of Steelix's core body. When coming up with the idea for this armor, I really like the idea of what if I split this big section of Steelix's body and made them into pauldrons with the angular steel cut shape with the crystals jutting out of them. Once I was happy with the finished shape that I got, I covered the half finished piece of the pauldron with some duct tape so I can make a pattern out of it to mirror that onto the other side of the pauldron, and then I can take that shape and mirror it to the other pauldron. And once I had both halves of the pauldron cut out, I went ahead and used contact cement to glue them onto the base for the pauldron. I started to make these foam towers and glue to the inside of the pauldron. These will serve as the mounting points for all the LEDs and for all the crystals on top of the pauldron. I used some foam clay that I got from TNT Cosplay Supplies. This stuff is really good for filling seams, or if you want to sculpt something out of this clay, it basically dries and turns into EVA foam. So you can sand it, you can like burn some detail into it. It's really cool stuff. For attaching the pauldrons to the armor, I decided to make some mounting points with some paracord buckles and attach them to the chest piece. I added some foam, some nylon banding, and these paracord buckles to each side, and this would serve as the main attachment point for the pauldrons on my shoulders. Here I'm cutting out some foam and gluing it to the inside of the pauldron. This will help add some height to the pauldron when it's sitting on my shoulder, and as a attachment point for some upholstery foam for some padding. And with that, that is the finish of the base for the pauldrons. To get a pattern to make the base belt that this armor is going to be sitting on top of, I wrap myself in some saran wrap and some duct tape. Once I drew on my pattern, I cut myself free and traced that belt pattern onto a strip of foam. Both of these pieces got heat formed into shape and then glued together with contact cement. So when designing this armor, I struggled a little bit when making the design for the waist armor, and I went through a few iterations and couldn't really find something that I liked. I eventually settled on this like plated armor on my hips, but once I started to actually cut out the pieces, I realized I did not like it at all. So I completely shifted gears on what was going to happen with the waist armor. Instead of the layered plate armor, I decided to make these large panels to go on the side of my hips and then wrap around to the back of my legs, pretty much, with this rock design inside of it. Here I'm patterning out the outside edge that I'm going to be cutting out of 2 layers of foam and sandwiching them together around this plate to go on my leg. I also cut some wedges out of the hip plates to give them a more rounded shape by gluing those two cut edges back together. Once I have my two pieces of foam sandwiched together, I go ahead and take my straight edge and draw a straight line around the entire edge of these foam pieces so then I can bevel them down with my box cutter. Afterwards, I sand them down so the edges are nice and clean, and I will start to glue them down to the hip panels. The hip panels then get attached to the belt that I made earlier, and this is what it looks like on me. Here I am adding a paracord buckle and some nylon strapping for the attachment for the belt. I'm also adding on these smaller rocks that I designed to fill in the empty space. Here I'm cutting out a bunch of little foam pieces into some random shapes, carving them down, and these are going to be turned into the rocks that fill up the empty space on my hips. And then all of them get hot glued onto the hip pieces. I decided I still really liked the thigh armor, the thigh plating that I designed with like the hexagons on them. I decided I still really like that armor design, so here I am cutting those out of foam and trying to build them up so I could attach them to the hip plates. Reason I decided to do this part while wearing my armor. I think I was just trying it on and I was like, I don't want to take it off before I attach something else, I guess. I don't know. It made for not good shots because I'm blocking the camera. And here I am making this front hexagon in inlaid shape so I can run LEDs through it, and then the hexagon on top of it is going to be made out of LED foam. These pieces then got attached to the hip armor with contact cement. And with that, that is the end of our video. Thank you so much for all you who watched through to the end of this video. I know it was a long one, but this was the end of part 1 for my Mega Steelix making of series. I hope to be posting part 2 soon, and in that one we'll be going over the rest of the build. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.